Welcome on in, guys. Tobin here with you. Miami Heat, they lose to the Utah Jazz 117-109. We'll dive into the game in just a bit. But the big story out of this one really surrounds number 22. Jimmy Butler makes his return after missing a handful of games in a row and was dealing with a calf injury. Seemed like maybe he was going to come back. He was on the road trip. He was going to come back against Golden State. Not the case. And he plays today against Utah, which was great. It was great to have Jimmy back. You could tell it was kind of a feeling out process. He was kind of laying low, did not feel like he wanted to hit the gas pedal too much too early. In fact, did not score until very, very late in the second quarter. Put the Heat up 51-50. It was only his second shot of the game. So he was having a very, very quiet performance as it was. You come out of the third quarter and leads are changing like crazy between Utah and Miami. And then Jimmy Butler has to go to the locker room. Heat are up about 6 around this point. Things are going pretty good for them, about as good as they have gone in this game after trailing Utah going into the break. But Jimmy had gotten to the line. It was a nice find by Nikola Jović to Jimmy Butler for an easy bucket. So he was starting to get going, and then all of a sudden you see him pull up against Colin Sexton, who gets a bucket. Colin Sexton and Jimmy Butler's just like, something's not right immediately. Goes to the locker room. They report not too much longer than after that he is done for the night with a foot injury. And this is obviously it. I think the big concern out of this game. You know, we can dive into what went wrong today with this one for sure. But Jimmy's kind of, it's hard not to feel like this kind of overshadows everything with him, because Jimmy's been dealing with a lot this year. He is, when Bam and Tyler were dealing with theirs, Jimmy had actually said when they were on the comeback, he goes, "Listen, don't jinx it. Don't talk about them coming back, and then all of a sudden, we're all whole again, because you never know." And really, it's been him who has been the guy, unfortunately, since Tyler and Bam have been back. Now we're dealing with Jimmy ailments, and this is nothing that the Heat fan isn't used to. There's just been stretches of the season where Jimmy is going to miss time. And I think I was asked about this today on Heat Weekly with Tommy Tighe. The Heat's approach with this and with Jimmy is always usually the same. Don't bring him back until he's 100%. Like, even if it's a ticky-tack injury or a lingering injury or something he could push through, you know how he's going to go pedal to the metal once the playoff time comes around, and especially before the new year turns. You gotta be very, very cautious with this stuff, and that's what they typically are. I think the thing that's discouraging about tonight, though, is, okay, he misses a handful of games, and now he has the foot injury, and you're immediately thinking to yourself, my immediate reaction to it is, well, he's probably going to miss the road trip, right? Like, that's just the natural place I go, because it's like when Jimmy Butler gets one of these, it usually feels like, oh, that's 5 games. That's going to be, if it's not the playoffs, if this is not a series on the line, if this is the regular season, it usually feels like, oh, that's going to be a handful of games. So curious to see what Spo has to say. I would imagine not much, because they're very tight-lipped on injuries. They don't reveal a whole hell of a lot. And for me, that's the biggest 1 and 2 storylines out of this one is Jimmy Butler returned. Jimmy Butler didn't feel like he was going balls to the wall like he was 100%, started to kind of get the engine going, and then all of a sudden, bang, foot injury. So not great. Not great. As far as the rest of the game is concerned, you got great performances by Bam and Tyler, especially Bam. Bam got to the free throw line 20 times, left some meat on the bone because he missed a bunch of free throws. Typically, has gotten away from that, so he could have been over 30 tonight. He finished with 28 points and 16 rebounds. So a really, really impressive performance by Bam today. But not, Tyler was giving you he gave you 25 points tonight. Really got off to a hot start. 16 points in the first half. Could have given you a little bit more, I thought, in the second half. A little bit more punch. I feel like Tyler only scored in a game that was back and forth, and they probably could have gone to him. I think Tyler only scored 4 in the second, 4 in the fourth quarter, or maybe it was just 2. Here, let me see. I got the box scores up. Fourth quarter only. Tyler was 1 of 6 in the fourth quarter. That was definitely felt. In the fourth quarter, it was tough for buckets to come by for Miami. Tyler was 1 of 6 and was 0 of 3. So I still think that even with the 25 points, Tyler Hero probably looks at a performance like this and thinks to himself, star guy Jimmy goes down. You see Bam's getting to the free throw line a ton. Could use a little bit something there, and it wasn't there for the Miami Heat. Bam, he got to the free throw line 8 times. And then the rest of it was kind of a hodgepodge off the bench. You really didn't get much from anybody outside of Jamal Cain, who had a nice little run for Miami. Jaime Jaquez, I would say Jaime probably had his worst game in a Heat uniform. And definitely the worst game I can remember to date. The last time that Jaime Jaquez shot 2 of 9 and was, in single digits, I mean, it's been a while. This kid has been absolutely killing it. He finished tonight 2 of 9, 0 for 4 from downtown. And I really felt like with Jaime, Kelly Olynyk and him ended up matched up a lot. And I almost felt like Kelly Olynyk was like, oh, you think you know footwork? I'm Kelly Olynyk. I know footwork. And so he was trying to take him. He was having a footwork off with Jaime Jaquez to kind of show like, hey, you think you got the cool hair and footwork and play at your own pace? I'm Kelly Olynyk. I've been doing this for ages. It was a tough one for Jaime. Probably the worst game he's played since the Wolves game. I think where he had that streak going. He was going to touch D Wade's double-digit streak, and that ended up being the one that cost him. And they come up short in a game against the West, a West team with a lot of size that's been playing really good. And Utah, who has not been what they were last year, where they kind of were first half darlings, caught everybody by surprise. A lot of those Lauri Markkanen stories and Walker Kessler had not been having the seasons that they were the year previous. But Walker Kessler definitely made an impact today. Had a monster block on Bam. He looked great. And definitely, I think, deterred a lot of things inside of the paint. The paint discrepancy for this game was 60-40 in favor of the Jazz. And then for the Miami Heat, they've been so good at making three-pointers. It was not a monster game. I mean, the only guy, you had Duncan, who was 3 of 5. Love was 2 for 8. Jović was 2 for 2. So those, and then Tyler Hero was 2 of 7. So nobody had this like monster game from downtown. And yeah, it did feel a little bit like when Jimmy Butler went out, it definitely felt like he was starting to kind of get things going. He was getting himself revved up. And so I do feel like it took the air out of the balloon a little bit. And the Heat really just couldn't contain the Jazz. They had a lot of different guys who stepped over him. Keontae George was probably the star of the game for them. He hit some really, really huge three-pointers. He had a huge day from 3 today, too. He was 5 of 8 from downtown, so he looked really good for the Utah Jazz. Kelly Olynyk was amazing for them. And, Colin Sexton, I thought, had a really great first half. Really great first half that kind of dictated things, gave him the lead, charged them back after Miami was starting to take control of things. Colin Sexton kind of said, nah, I'm taking that back here. So for the Jazz, they had to be probably impressed, especially with the young rookie Keontae George. That guy looked absolutely amazing today. And for Miami, this is going to be an interesting one just because, they were already down a lot of bodies as it was with Caleb out, Kyle Lowry out, Jay Rich out. They started R.J. Hampton. R.J. Hampton did not start the second half. They started Haywood Highsmith. That was another storyline we should probably mention. Haywood Highsmith, nasty collision with Colin Sexton in this game. That looked pretty rough. So I think that this is one of those where he is, you got to worry about him and make sure that he's going to be okay. They are going to go to L.A. now. They basically get to travel to L.A. and have almost a week there. So that's not too much of a toll on the body, but 2 big challenges ahead with taking on the Clippers and the Lakers for sure. And I would say as far as, the other big thing to cover in this game was, I mentioned it briefly with Jimmy, but Nikola Jović got to start, which I was very excited about. Hit a couple of threes, but I would say, while I thought Nikola definitely didn't play with his head down and didn't play discouraged, also just had a real propensity to fouling today. It was a problem. He would run into shooters. His fifth foul was a little bit bogus. Leroy Markkanen charged in on him. I thought that Jović got position. If he didn't, he was right there. And so that, I think you're seeing a really good measure, and we saw that with Steph Curry the other night. So he'll stay in there and take a charge. I think you give Jović that with his size. He's not afraid to get his Kevin Love on and sit in there and take some contact. But he was already in foul trouble before that. So that was the big story for him. It was tough for him to get going other than those he had those 3-point shots, and he had that really nice assist to Jimmy Butler. But it was a struggle with staying on the floor today. So, yeah, outside of your big gun, once you lost Jimmy and outside of your big guns in Tyler and Bam, you didn't get a whole lot. You know, it was tough to find a consistent offensive force, and a lot of Bam stuff was basically head down, get to the free throw line a ton, and nobody was, he just couldn't get a couple of big threes to swing the momentum back their way. That instead went to Utah. And that's where it was for them. So big concern out of this is not really so much the team and the way they played. I thought that it was a very, very back and forth game. A couple of possessions killed them. But to me, the bigger concern out of this is Jimmy and Jimmy having another injury to deal with. And wondering, kind of where we're at with that. I heard Spo's press conference. He's like, no real updates, so I'm sure they'll know more tomorrow, but not great. I mean, like, it didn't look great when it was happening. It looked like he was starting to kind of favor that leg as it was already. He comes in this with a calf injury. A lot of the times this stuff can trickle down on you, or you're compensating for something else, and, huge bummer from that standpoint for Jimmy Butler. And you just hope that this isn't one that lingers, because typically – he gets one of these and it does seem to linger for a week plus, 2 weeks, 4 games, 5 games. And that's, hopefully this is, all right, he's out. Maybe he's back by the end of the trip, something like that. But we'll have to see what's up with that, because certainly concerning when you hear this about your star.